Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, a solar superhero, Bernadette Del Chiaro, and she is the Senior Vice President of California of the Environmental Working Group, and also famously known as being the Executive Director for the California Solar and Storage Association for 11 years, 10 months, 2 days, and 37 seconds or something like that. I just kind of made up the seconds part and all that. But yeah, welcome, Bernadette. It's so great to have you on here.
Thank you. It's really fun to be here.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this for a long time. And seriously, you're one of my heroes in the solar industry. You've been at it for a long time. And I know that you are super famous for being like the greatest champion of distributed generation.
Well, likewise, Mutual Appreciation Society, Sean, really great to be here. And I'm a huge fan of yours. And yeah, if that was the epitaph on my gravestone, I would be a proud person to go down as being a great champion of distributed generation or rooftop solar or whatever you want to call it. I just think it is such an important technology and such an important thing for our planet and for humans and for ratepayers and everybody included. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, for your gravestone. Okay, you know what? I'm going to go get that done right away. Nothing like having one made up front, before inflation and everything gets to it.
There you go.
All right. Yeah. So everybody's wondering what you've been up to with the Environmental Working Group.
Yeah, it's been about 9 months since I made the shift over from CALSA to EWG, Environmental Working Group. And for those who aren't familiar with Environmental Working Group, we're a 30-plus-year-old organization. We are a nonprofit, obviously environmental organization, and we have worked on energy as well as toxics issues. So we have a sort of strong science base and consumer-facing program and mission to make sure that people are just given the ability to live a healthy life, right? And have the choices and the information that they need to do that. So distributed generation, solar energy, batteries, all that fit right in really well with EWG's mission. And we've been working for a very long time on pushing back on particularly investor-owned utilities all across the country, but especially in California, and pushing back on their, stranglehold and trying to, block and tackle people's ability to invest in their own solar energy. And so most recently, there's been two major projects that I've been working on with EWG since making the shift over. The biggest one has been our lawsuit, which I'd love to talk about. So we are part of a coalition.
I love talking about lawsuits. Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay. So the lawsuit challenging the Public Utilities Commission in California, decision over net metering. So would love to dive into that. And then the other big issue we're really excited about is balcony solar, how to just expand the universe of people having access to the sun by incorporating super easy plug and play portable systems that can work really well for people that are renters, and everybody can make use of these technologies. So how do we streamline and smooth out the pathway for those technologies as well? The two kind of big issues I'm working on right now.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I was over in Europe over at the Smarter E Intersolar Conference in May, I think it was. And it was kind of crazy how much balcony solar they had over there. They had like a huge bunch of, area with a whole bunch of booths that were doing balcony solar. I remember they even had balcony solar installation companies. They would help people manage their wires, because I guess in balcony solar, you can also install your own. It's like a lot of people just do it themselves. But that's pretty cool. And then you mentioned net metering and balcony solar. Can you do both of those at once? Like when you do balcony solar and you're exporting, I know you're supposed to not have to get an interconnection agreement, but does net metering work with that, or do you know?
Yeah, you can. I think the biggest potential market in Germany, and I think here in California, is going to be people that don't have easy access to their roof. And, so for example, renters. But if you do currently have a net metered system and you want to add a plug-in solar system to that, you absolutely can. And it's a great way to make an addition to your solar system without, having to go through complicated, interconnection and potentially lose your net metering status. So it's a technology that can work for everybody. And it really reinforces this idea that solar panels are really an appliance. They're a common everyday appliance, like a toaster, and you can just plug them in. I mean, obviously a hardwired rooftop system or ground mounted system is going to ultimately give you way more power and way more energy independence. Look, we should just be honest about that. It's just the physics of it. But these plug and play systems are really great options if you live in a smaller home or a renter, don't have access to a roof, and or want just to make some small additions to your existing system. It's just adds to the options. That's all we want to do, is give people as many options to plug into the sun as possible.
Well, maybe if you had a whole bunch of balconies, but what would happen though if you had balcony solar and you were making more than you were using? Say you're out of town, it's the summertime. Do you get credit for that? Or maybe they're still writing the policy?
Well, we're still writing the policy. I think what the vision would be is if you're just a plain old plug-in solar user. No, I don't think we want to kind of confuse this with net metering and that idea of getting a credit or a feed-in tariff policy. These systems are really designed to meet on-site load and to be pretty small. So the law that was passed last May in Utah caps the system size at 1.2 kilowatts. So these are really small, relatively small systems designed just to meet your air conditioning load for the most part, or other indoor appliances. And so there really shouldn't be any kind of backfeeding at all from these systems.
But like, say somebody's in Utah and they're not home and it's springtime, the air conditioner's not on, there's a real super bright sunny day, and everybody's at church, and then the sun is hitting that PV hard. Does the inverter have to throttle down so it doesn't export? Do you know? Or is it just too new to know about this kind of stuff?
Well, it's all a question of how we want to write the policy and drive the market. But I think two things. One is people can have batteries with these systems. Some of the more expensive options do come with batteries. Two is, back in, what I'm familiar with, you go to church in the morning, so you're probably not at peak generation capacity. But nonetheless, I think, if the utilities get a couple of free kilowatts out of the deal, that's not such a bad thing. Again, I think what we want to do is step back and look at, these are going to be small systems, not really, typically going to be backfeeding very much. And then they can be equipped with technologies that prevent any backfeeding should the grid go down. So certainly that would be a requirement of a plug-in solar system. If the grid goes down, it's not actively generating electrons and sending them back.
Okay. So let's see, your two topics, I tried to combine them. That was net metering and balcony solar. Do you want to do them one at a time now? That we did the hard
Sure.
part of doing them both at once?
Yeah, let's talk about,
So like you start off with net metering. So net metering pretty much is getting credit for exporting. And so you're making more than you're using, and the grid works like a battery sort of. And that means you don't need batteries as much too. So I guess people that are doing energy storage, maybe they don't like net metering, like somebody making a battery, like a battery manufacturer. But we like net metering because we like lots of solar and distributed generation and sharing electrons and all that kind of stuff. What's up with net metering and all these fun lawyers that we love so much?
Well, I mean, I thought it was a great, of course, summary of what net metering is. I think, we often talk about net metering as being a incentive program to help drive consumers toward investing in solar. And that's a really important part of this whole conversation, because California needs more clean energy resources, and we need them more to be in a distributed fashion to put less pressure on the electric grid and save everybody money. And it's true that net metering, the policy in essence, makes the grid into a kind of a giant battery. But the flip side of that is what you kind of touched upon. Net metering, if you think about it, is the world's largest neighborhood sharing program. I mean, that is every electron that is not consumed on site by the solar owner in real time is directly shared with their neighbor. It's the way electricity works. It doesn't go all the way, back to the transmission lines in the middle of the Central Valley or what have you. It just goes to your neighbor and your other neighbor and your other neighbor, depending on what the demand is at that point and how much you're exporting back to the grid. And so you're essentially sharing electrons, making incredibly light use of the pre-existing infrastructure of the small little wires that exist and would exist even if you didn't have solar between our homes, with no need to upgrade, those wires or change anything. And it in effect makes all of the homes in your neighborhood more energy efficient from a grid perspective. So on hot summer days, which is when, of course, solar works best, rooftop solar all across California, all 2 million systems that we have installed now, is basically making neighborhood sharing possible and helping make all of those neighborhoods that host solar roofs, whether that's commercial, industrial, or residential, way more efficient and less of a burden on a strained electric grid. So that sharing concept somehow is sort of, I feel like, gotten lost in the weeds, especially as people have started to talk about community solar. It's almost like people think that community solar systems are sharing, but net metering isn't. Somehow this sharing idea has really gotten lost. So I'm really glad you kind of mentioned that so we could talk about it. But yeah, our lawsuit is really important because it challenges the very premise on which the Public Utilities Commission adopted their, draconian and devastating net metering decision back in 2022. And it requires the commission, if we're successful, to basically go back and this time actually read the law and follow the law. So that our contention with the lawsuit is the PUC broke the law. It isn't just that we don't like the outcome. It's not that it's not that simple. It is an accusation that they broke the law. And we detail that in and over the course of many, many pages, how they broke the law. And I think it's really important because the Public Utilities Commission largely operates in this sort of independent, above the law sort of mindset. They sort of feel like they've gotten away with so much and the courts have really deferred to them. And this is a problem across many decades, a lot across issues well beyond rooftop solar. And I think what our lawsuit is doing that is really precedential and really historic and important is that we're really challenging that and we're getting the courts to provide that oversight of this really powerful state agency. And that's a level of oversight they really haven't had to be subjected to. This is what we won at the Supreme Court. Let me back up. The PUC made this bad decision, siding with PG&E and the other investor-owned utilities in 2022. EWG and two other partner organizations, Center for Biological Diversity and the Protect Our Communities Foundation from San Diego, we appealed the decision. We said to the PUC, we think you broke the law. And you should go back and redo your decision. They, of course, said, no, we didn't, and we're not going to. And so we filed a lawsuit in California State Court claiming that they broke the law. That initial Court of Appeal decision came back against us. The original Court of Appeal agreed with the PUC and PG&E, and they agreed with them under a very broad, what's called standard of review that provided a lot of deference, again, to the state agency. Kind of this notion that the PUC is full of a bunch of experts, electricity is complicated, and we, the courts, don't have that expertise, so we're going to defer to the experts. And we thought that was a misunderstanding of state law, that in and of itself, the Court of Appeal. And so we appealed that decision to the Supreme Court of the state of California. And that's the decision we most recently won. So in August of 2025, the Supreme Court agreed with us that the lower court used the wrong review. They did not properly read the statute, analyze the statute. And when I say the statute, this is the law that California lawmakers passed back in 2013, and with very clear instructions on how to continue to make sure that rooftop solar grows in California. And they failed to do that. And the Supreme Court agreed that the lower court didn't properly review our case. And so they overturned that original decision and they sent it back to that Court of Appeal for reconsideration. And that's where we are right now.
Do you think there's a chance then that we won't have to have what they call NEM 3.0, which is not really net metering, where they just give you a tiny bit when you export? Are they going to overturn that if you win?
It absolutely is possible, and that would be the outcome if we win. There is no, the court doesn't mediate and decide what should the alternative net metering policy be. The court would just either say, PUC, your decision from 2022 was illegal, and it is now it's done away with. And then the PUC would have the choice of either staying with NEM 2.0, so the previous program that was in place, or opening up a whole new proceeding to figure out, okay, what else, what should a NEM 3.0 be or whatever look like? Like, where did we get it wrong? And how can we course correct? And, part of the whole thing of how the PUC got it so wrong is they just ignored the statute. They ignored the way the legislature told them that they need to analyze the benefits of rooftop solar and analyze whatever the costs are of rooftop solar. Just analyze this technology and this consumer program accurately and honestly and without undue influence from the utilities. I mean, that's essentially what the statute says. And so the PUC would have to go back to the drawing board and do the job the right way, sort of similar to the way the PUC did in 2016. Under the Brown administration, the PUC has already gone through this process of reviewing net metering and coming up with a successor tariff to the original one we had in place for 20 years. And they did a decent job. The market was given a small haircut, but it wasn't drastic, and they properly analyzed things and followed the statute. And in 2022, it's like night and day. The PUC, the way they read this, actually didn't even bother to read and analyze the statute and defend against the statute. They just sort of did their own thing. And it's pretty clear when you just take a look at that they just sort of ignored the law. So yeah, they'd have to go back to the drawing board. What we get out of that, we don't know. That's not, the court's not going to weigh in on that. But it's my hope that if we win, it will not only give us another shot at reinvigorating the rooftop solar market, but also really challenging this whole cost shift mythology that they have cooked up and that they cooked up in order to justify that really damaging and bad decision.
If they make that this was illegal, if the courts decide it, will everybody on NEM 3.0 get refunds?
That's a big, huge question. I don't know how they would handle that and if they would dictate that for the commission. But yeah, that's a huge question for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Sean White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSEAN, that's Solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his heat spring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show.
And just out of curiosity too, what do you think is worse for residential solar in California? Getting rid of the 30% tax credit or NEM 3.0?
Oh, hands down, NEM 3.0. I mean, the tax credit was, kind of the right punch after the state of California's left punch, if you will, the left-right punch. But it obviously it hasn't even hit our market yet, right? It'll hit really in January. So yeah, no question, an almost overnight disappearance of a 30% discount is a huge deal. But the impact of net metering, right? We went from getting retail credit mostly minus a few cents for public purpose programs down to 5 cents for the credit. So that's it was an 80% drop in the value of exported energy overnight. And it basically made rooftop solar kind of effectively twice as expensive. So the math on that versus losing a 30% reduction was much more devastating to the California rooftop solar market than the ITC will be.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And one of the things that I liked, I remember the California Solar Initiative, when they got rid of the incentive, it slowly dropped down. And with what we're talking about 3.0, with the net metering or not net metering, some people call it net billing, and with the 30% tax credit, it's like an overnight thing, which is just it's bad for business. It creates layoffs, it just creates all this big rush to get things done one day and then the next day, and it's all over. And it's just kind of crazy that they do things that way.
Absolutely. And, what's so frustrating is the commission and the 2022 version of the PUC commission, they're a very political agency, right? The 5 people that govern and run that agency are all appointed by the governor. And so they're incredibly political. And so the version of the PUC that voted for that bad decision in 2022, they did this. It's really almost insulting to anybody's intelligence, but they pretended to have a quote unquote glide path in their decision. So they kind of checked the box on calling it a glide path. But if you actually look at the analysis that CalSA did at the time, it was just an immediate precipitous drop and then flatline, from there. There's no glide path at all, but they kind of claimed that there was one. They gave it kind of lip service, which it's just frustrating. It's frustrating to have a public agency that's supposed to be there for consumers, like that's their entire mission, to have them so kind of in the pocket of the utilities and so captured.
That's unfortunate. And it's also interesting that the Public Utilities Commission is pretty much appointed by the governor. And then the governor right now is maybe the top contender to be the next president, according to some people. So do you think maybe that will hurt his chances because he doesn't have the full support of the solar industry? Or maybe that's a good no comment thing.
Yeah, I would love it
side.
if the solar industry was that powerful, we would not be in this situation. Yeah, no, I think politics plays a role. I think you've got to know that PG&E and the other investor-owned utilities are not only incredibly powerful, but they are the number one campaign contributor in the state of California among all industries. So just take that fact in for a minute. Like if you think about California, we've got the oil industry, we've got the pharmaceutical industry, we've got, Apple, we've got Alphabet, Google, whatever, all of these incredibly deep-pocketed industries that care a lot about the decisions being made in Sacramento. And among all of those industries, the investor-owned utilities of California are the number one campaign contributor. They're beyond powerful. They really have a stranglehold on Sacramento. And as a result, they have a stranglehold on the PUC, which is a huge problem, again, outside of the issue of rooftop solar, right? A lot of people right now are complaining about the lack of affordability of electricity. And this is a issue all across the country, with the recent elections in New Jersey and elsewhere, really kind of hinging on issues of energy affordability. These elections all across the country hinging on affordability. So you have this huge problem of affordability, regardless of whether you have solar or not or care about solar. This is a problem. And the reason why electricity is so unaffordable is because the government that is supposed to rein in the spending of these investor-owned utilities is asleep at the wheel. And so this stranglehold that the utilities have on our government is a really big problem. It's the root of the problem for both rooftop solar, but just energy issues at large.
Yeah, and I think the big problem is if that campaign contributions rule the world, or at least rule our country. And I don't know what the solution is for that, or just to get people to vote for people that don't have all these campaign contributions, like even just to look and see where people are getting their money from and vote based on that. Maybe that would be a good thing to do. So who's going to run for president, you or me? Or let's say governor. You want to flip a coin? No.
No, thank you.
And then I know you've worked with a lot of governors. I know for sure, I think Jerry Brown, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Gavin Newsom, I think. Am I missing any?
Well, I've worked with other governors in other states before I moved back home to California. But yes, since 2002, Gray Davis was in office for a very short time when I first came back. I came back in 2002, so I overlapped with Davis for 2 years. So I've experienced the Davis administration, Schwarzenegger, Brown, and Newsom, sort of 4 governors across those years, but most intensely, of course, the last 3.
So I personally know Jerry Brown from quite a while ago. But I bet you have some interesting stories about some of these governors. Have you ever been in Arnold Schwarzenegger's cigar tent or anything like that?
Yeah, I have. And, both he and Jerry Brown in 2 very different ways, but they were genuine believers in rooftop solar, genuine believers in solar energy in general, but specifically in this idea of empowering consumers to have their own access to the sun, and not just empowering them, but incentivizing it, making it easier, making it more affordable, driving that solution forward. Both of them personally believed in those goals. And therefore, worked to make sure that their administration followed that vision. And so we saw a lot of really progressive policies coming out of the Public Utilities Commission during that era. And again, it's not that the utilities didn't have a voice. They had a seat at the table. They pushed back. We never got everything that we wanted by any stretch. We'd be a lot further along right now in solving energy problems and air pollution problems if we had. But overall, we made huge progress. And it was in large part thanks to those two governors and their vision and their support of this shared vision. I think so many of us have. It's such a no-brainer. There's a solar installer named Josh who is a former Texas oil worker who kind of deserted that and came out here to install solar instead. And he told me this great, thing, which is if it rained oil, you better believe we'd all put buckets on our roof. And that's all that solar panels are. They're basically buckets collecting sunshine. And you better believe we would do that if it rained oil. And what are we doing not doing that with solar, right? It's just such a no-brainer. Everybody gets it. It cuts across all demographics, all political backgrounds. And yet, right now we're just in this weird place where California has sort of not only turned its back on the technology, but is really aggressively coming after it, proposing to tax it, proposing to make it harder. It's, we're just on constant defense right now, and that really has to change.
So you also wanted to talk about balcony solar. What's happening with balcony solar with you?
Well, as you mentioned at the beginning, we're really seeing this technology, balcony solar, take off in Europe. Germany, for example, has grown to now 4 million systems have been installed, generating gigawatts and gigawatts worth of solar energy. So in the aggregate, just like all forms of distributed generation, each system is small, but since everybody can come and be part of this revolution, it can really add up and be meaningful. What plug-in solar or balcony solar or plug-in solar is it's a portable solar panel that comes with a little built-in inverter right on the back of the panel. And you just literally plug and play. You just plug the solar panel. It comes with a cord with a standard plug, and you can just plug it into a regular outlet in your home. And the way electricity, again, works is it just flows either direction. So we can flow it straight to whatever appliance you have turned on inside your apartment or inside your home, and it can just immediately reduce your consumption of electricity from the grid, which of course has become increasingly expensive. So it's really exciting because it's exactly the same as bolted on rooftop solar or ground mounted systems that are hardwired. It's the exact same technology. It's just for people who maybe don't have good access to a roof, like they're a renter in an apartment building, or maybe they're a renter in a single family home and they can't get permission to put on rooftop solar because they don't own the house. Or maybe they have a home and it's just shaded, the roof is shaded, but they have a little backyard spot. They got some, the fence they could lean the panels against or what have you. There's lots of folks that could take advantage of this technology, and just its portability and its plug and play feature just really expands options for people. So the key is to promote this technology and to make sure that the utilities don't get their claws into it like they do everything else. And so to make it to where you don't need to apply for interconnection, you don't need to go through any hoops, you don't have to get a building permit, all these things. These are plug and play appliances, just like a toaster oven. And if we can keep that and promote that technology, people will be able to go to, Home Depot, go on Amazon, go to IKEA, you name it, and buy these plug-in systems and put them to use right away. It's easier than an IKEA piece of furniture to set up.
Just plug it on in. Yeah, so one of the things too is like you were just saying, like solar electricity, it just goes backwards. It just goes the other direction. And that works with balcony solar, and it also works with net metering. And when you're exporting, if your neighborhood could take in a megawatt from the utility, your neighborhood could send out a megawatt the other direction, right towards the utility. And all those wires, they're already sized for that, and all those transformers and everything. And I think a lot of times too is what will happen is those corrupt people that we've been talking about will try to think they'll try to put it in a different perspective and say that, oh, we have to have all this electricity all at once. And if everybody turned everything on, and like if you have a 200 amp service, on average, you're using 5 amps. If you have solar, maybe on average, you're using less than 5 amps because you're making it yourself. So people need to take that into consideration. And there might be a couple of corrupt engineers there working with the PUC trying to make it sound a lot worse than it is. So
there's I think, a mind-blowing fact that a lot of people don't know that kind of tells that story in a slightly different way. Over the past 20 years, California consumers have not increased their use of electricity supplied from the grid at all. It's been flat. So electricity demand on the grid has been flat, both at peak time, so 3:00 in the afternoon on hot summer days, and throughout the year, has been flat for 20 years. And if you stop and you think about that, this is despite population growth, right, since 2020. This is despite increased temperatures and higher need for air conditioning. This is despite an increase in electronic gadgets inside our homes, inside our offices, increased use of electric cars. There's also, and just economic growth, right? California is now the 4th largest economy. When I first started doing this work, we were the 5th largest economy. So our economy has grown. We're largely dependent on electricity. How did we manage to do that? To grow our economy, grow our use of electricity, but not increase demand on the grid? And the answer is not just energy efficiency, which is what people often talk to. The gap between usage, actual growth in usage, and demand on the grid is too big. The answer, the reason why we have been able to accomplish this feat is because of rooftop solar, is because 2 million people invested their own money and generated their own electricity to cover increased load growth, but both covering their own and then covering their neighbors. And so we've managed to grow our economy without putting extra strain on the electric grid over the course of the past 20 years, which, by the way, is exactly what the vision was for the Million Solar Roofs Initiative passed in 2006. We, as a state of California, were still reeling from the Enron crisis of 2000, 2001. We were incredibly concerned about our ability to keep up with demand, right? Demand kept outpacing supply, leading to jacked up prices and blackout threats. And so the legislature at the time and the governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, said, we need to do something about this, empowering people to generate their own electricity and share it with their neighbors down within the neighborhood level. That is a win-win-win. Add on 5 other wins on there because it is exactly what California needs. And so the people of California responded. Industry stepped forward, providing not only incredible installations, but also lowering costs. And we did it. We kept demand flat. We kept costs down. And we built, 16 gigawatts worth of rooftop solar or distributed solar. And that is just sort of lost on a lot of people because we have these new ideas about, evening electricity demand, these time of use policies that charge us more in the evening. It gives us this sense that California's peak electricity usage is in the evening, not in the day. And it really, because it's rooftop solar has basically reduced load growth, it's kind of invisible, right? Because the growth never materialized on the grid. The demand on the grid never materialized. It's invisible to a lot of state agencies and a lot of grid managers. And so they kind of take it for granted. So it's this amazing, amazing resource that we collectively as Californians brought about. And it's something that people, I think, don't quite understand and quite appreciate how important that's been.
Yeah, and Bernadette, you've been very important for that transition. California started the solar industry, and you were in charge of the California Solar and Storage Association, and you give great speeches. Everybody loves to listen to your speeches, and especially about distributed generation. And it's been a great pleasure having you here on the podcast. Very
Thank
special.
You, Sean. It's been so great. It's so good.
Yeah. So how could people get involved with what you're doing now with the Environmental Working Group, the EWG?
Well, yeah, thank you for asking that. We are a nonprofit, so we do always have our hand out. We are a 501c3, which means donations to EWG are tax deductible, and we do always welcome donations. We actually have a legal defense fund campaign right now. You can go to our LinkedIn page or my LinkedIn page to see a link, or you could just shoot me an email, Bernadette@ewg.org. Reach out, love to connect with anybody, and we would welcome donations big and small to help us cover the legal costs of defending, rooftop solar and consumers' rights to tap into the sun.
Great. Yeah. And let me know the next time you want to go sailing, or if you're somewhere near San Francisco, and Bill and I will come out and we'll take you out underneath the Golden Gate Bridge on our sailboat. And it was really good to talk to you. And any famous last words?
That sounds amazing, Sean. Thank you. Famous last words. It's been a hard couple of years, whether you're looking at what's happening in Washington, D.C., or you're looking at what's happening in Sacramento. On energy, it just feels like we're moving backwards. But I'm really optimistic about our future. I see, again, people coming together across all political spectrums to just demand positive change. And I think we're ready to start moving back forward again in 2026. So I'm really optimistic, even though it's going to be a hard year with all of these bad decisions that have been coming from both federal and state policymakers. But we're going to ride this wave and stay on track and keep solar growing in California.
Yeah, thanks for making it happen, Bernadette Del Chiaro. And thanks for listening to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. Come to SolarSEAN.com and get yourself NABCEP certified, learn all about solar, have me go teach a class somewhere, anywhere, California, outside of California. And what else, Bernadette?
Keep going solar.
Okay, all right. Keep going solar. Ow! Woo!